Welcome to another First Thursday event from the Space Coast Progressive Alliance. I'm Phil Stasik, past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and I would like to welcome you tonight to our special presentation called Yes on 4. Now, this SCPA has been focusing on issues related to the election, the upcoming election, all year long, really. We made a special point of inviting candidates, people talking about the various issues, and it's been really an educational period for all of us. Now, we're preparing for the election in November, but the truth is, the election is really right around the corner. People will be doing vote by mail, balloting in the middle of October. So we're really just a little more than a month out from the beginning of the election. So our candidates, will need your support. If you're thinking about supporting a candidate, doing door knocking or sending any money or whatever, this is the time that they desperately need it. This is the final push after Labor Day. So please, we don't endorse candidates. But we certainly do discuss issues. We certainly do give the candidates a forum to speak, and we do encourage you to vote. It is so important. Every vote counts. We know how tight this election is going to be. And we also encourage you to please vote the whole ballot. When it comes time to vote, many people think about the people at the top of the ballot, folks up in Washington, but doggone it, our local races are very, very, very important too. And this year we have several amendments to the Florida state constitution that have been proposed. And the Space Coast Progressive Alliance is encouraging you to vote yes on Amendment 3 and 4 and no on the rest. But you have to make your own decision. And if you've been following us through the year and you've heard our various speakers coming and going, you'll understand why we've taken those positions. But tonight is our chance to really dig into Amendment 4 and why it is important for you to pay attention to this, why we believe that you should vote yes. And we'll also be looking at the issues surrounding Project 2025 and its impact on women, especially here in the state of Florida. We have two wonderful speakers tonight, absolute bright stars in their field. First is Kolyn Brown, Deputy Organizing Director for Floridians Protecting Freedom. That's the Yes on 4 organization. We also have Jason Garcia. Jason is an investigative reporter, podcaster, and producer of the Seeking Rents program. And I'll tell you what, we've had Jason before. Many of us have heard Kolyn speak. These are terrific speakers, and they will have some action items for us at the end of the program. And of course, after each of them speaks, we will open the floor so that you, our guests, can and our members can directly talk to them, directly get your questions answered, fill in some of the blanks that you might have on these issues. So it's a wonderful night tonight. We encourage you to pay attention. We encourage you to stay with us and ask those questions as the program progresses. But first, we have a little bit of business to take care of first. And right now, I'm going to hand the floor over to our president, Karen Houston. Karen, you have the floor.
Thank you, Phil. And first of all, let me say thank you to our guests for taking time out to come in and speak to us, enlighten us about what's happening. And we have to understand what's happening when we see these amendments. We don't want to say eeny, meeny, miny, mo, because we're not aware of what they stand for. So thank you all for coming and enlightening us tonight. And I want to say thank you to Janice Moran. She's the chair of our Action Projects Committee, and we have a committee, and those committee members work really hard. Janice has been working extra hard lately, but they work really hard to put these programs together every month. And so we just want to say thank you to Janice. We appreciate you and your hard work, and the committee, all the committee members. Thank you so very much. Our next Zoom event will be Educated We Stand, and that will be on Thursday, October 3rd, right here on Zoom once again. So pay attention to what's happening, your SCPA website and Facebook. And as Nellie said, you'll be able to see all of this on our website later on. So you can always check our website out at scpaflorida.com. That's scpaflorida.com. So at the end of the night, we ask our guests to our panelists to give us an action item. And we all know that if we just hear the action item, you do nothing about it, it's a waste of time and energy. So we are asking that you, whatever they, items they give us to take action on, we're asking you to take action. And always remember, go to the polls and take 3, 4, 5, 10 people with you. All right, I'm gonna turn it back to you, Phil. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Karen. And I think it's important for all of us to say thanks to Karen. She has been a terrific president for us this year. This has been a particularly tough year for us as some of our key people have aged out and folks that are here are getting stretched kind of thin. And so, Karen, you have really stepped in when we needed you most. So thank you very much, Karen, for doing that, for being who you are. And of course, we just celebrated Labor Day. And Karen, that is, I know, a special holiday for you.
Yes.
So thank you so much for that. Hey, it's about time for our 1 minute community announcements. For anybody that is here, if you have something you would like to announce to the group, if there's a candidate that's running for office and you want a minute to step on the stump and give us your stump speech, or like to tell us who you are, whatever, if you got something else that's going on, this is our chance. Anybody that, by the way, we might as well talk about this now. If you are interested in talking, if you're going to be asking a question later, the technology here on Zoom is to look for the little button that says react. They've updated that so it's got a little heart next to it. And there is when you hit react, whether you're on a phone, a pad, or a computer, it's slightly different in a slightly different place. But look for the little thing that says raise hand. When you click that, you come to the front of the list, then we can call on you. We'll see you. That's our way of being able to give you a little voice in the program. So again, look for the react button, click that, hit the raise hand part, and I see we've got a Vicky and Poco has her hand up. Vicky, you have the floor. Uh-oh, you've got to unmute yourself, Vicky.
Sorry. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew that this Saturday was the statewide 2024 Florida Victory rallies all across the state. And we're lucky we have one right here in Brevard County Saturday, September 7th from 12 to 2 p.m. This, of course, is for Kamala Harris. It's going to be at Wickham Park at the Community Center, 2815 Leisure Way in Melbourne. And we will have Florida Democratic Chair Nikki Fried and Florida Democrat Senate candidate Debbie Mucarsel Powell. So we want to go and support them. And I'll put the link to sign up in the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vicky. It's good to have candidates from any party who think that Brevard County is important enough that they take their precious time and come here. So thanks for the heads up on that, Vicky. It really is.
Okay.
Anybody else? Do we have any candidates? Do we have anybody that has any other community announcements? I know I saw the president of the League of Women Voters is here. Suzanne, do you have anything you'd like to talk to the community about?
I always do. And I'm sorry, I can't turn on my camera.
No problem. Okay? We can hear you.
Okay, that's fine. Just to say, we have a bunch of candidate forums that we're planning. Some at Eastern Florida State College on October 1 and October 10. Cape Canaveral Mayor's Forum, October 21. There's one in Satellite Beach in October. The date's escaping me, and some others that are still pending. So if you're looking for candidate forums, please go to our website, League of Women Voters of the Space Coast, and look on our calendar for those. That's all. Thank you very much, Phil.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. The League of Women Voters is a longtime ally of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, and they've been working very, very hard to try to promote voting, promote voter education, encourage candidates opportunities to speak out. We enjoyed working with them to do our candidate hobnob together with the NAACP. So thank you for that. One of the things that the Space Coast Progressive Alliance is encouraging you to do is to please, when you're considering voting, please consider voting by mail. Many people are shy about voting by mail. There are 1,000 reasons why it's really a great idea. We're begging people on our hands and knees to please vote by mail, at least, or get your vote by mail ballot. And you can even take that to the polls with you if you wish. But getting a vote by mail ballot and getting it turned in quickly is a terrific idea. So we encourage you to do that. Do we have anybody else? Any other community announcements? It doesn't look like it. And later on, we're going to be doing a Q&A. We may have the opportunity to open that up if anybody's arriving late. But let us see here. We are, and I'm not sure why Suzanne, well, whatever. The essence is we're going to proceed with our program. And for those of you that arrived maybe a little bit late, our event tonight is called Yes on 4, and that's referring to the amendment, the proposed amendment to the Florida state constitution. And by the way, Nellie, I'm not sure if you're seeing the same thing I am, but I see that Suzanne's little tag is stuck on the screen. And I don't know if you're seeing the same thing I am, but anyway.
Yeah, that's her icon.
Okay.
She's using a picture just like mine.
Okay, already. It looked like it was stuck. Anyway, the essence is our two speakers tonight are Kolyn Brown, Deputy Organizing Director from Florida Protecting Freedom, and Jason Garcia, investigative reporter, podcaster, producer of Seeking Rents. Both wonderful speakers who are going to be talking about the first about this Amendment 4, which some of you have heard of, some of you may know all about it, but I'm pretty sure that there are some gaps in people's knowledge. People need to learn more about the proposed Amendment 4 to the Florida State Constitution. And then Jason is going to pick up how Project 2025 has been threatening women's rights, frankly, across the United States, but specifically here in Florida. So let me hand the floor right over to Kolyn Brown. You have the floor.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to start sharing screen, and hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. You should be able to see my screen. Can I get a thumbs up if you can see it?
There it is. You're up.
Okay, awesome. As Phil said, and I apologize, there's a big lightning storm happening around me right now. So if you can hear thunder, I'm sorry. But my name is Kolyn. I use she or they pronouns. I am the Deputy Organizing Director for Yes on 4. And I'm here to talk to you about our initiative and our organization. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the 6-week ban. And then we're going to go over the best ways to talk about Amendment 4 with Florida voters. So I hope that you all find this very beneficial. First of all, the overwhelming majority of Floridians think that we should have the freedom to make our own personal healthcare decisions without interference from politicians. Despite that, this year, politicians in Florida signed one of the most extreme abortion bans in the nation. It bans abortion at 6 weeks before most people realize they're pregnant. And we're here to put these decisions back in the hands of Florida families and their doctors. So Yes on 4 is a statewide campaign of allied organizations and concerned citizens working together to limit government interference with abortion. Our leading partner organizations, as you can see, are ACLU of Florida, Florida Rising, Women's Voices of Southwest Florida, or Voices of Southwest Florida now, Florida Women's Freedom Coalition, SEIU 1199 Florida, and Planned Parenthood organizations in Florida, as well as over 200 endorsing organizations and over 100 healthcare professionals signed on with us as well. Our coalition works together to ensure we're reaching voters in diverse communities across Florida about limiting government interference with abortion. And you're going to hear me say those words a lot, limiting government interference with abortion, because that is what the amendment is and what it talks about. So let's talk about the extreme abortion ban. On May 1st, an extreme abortion ban with no real exceptions for rape or incest took effect. Those so-called exceptions are meaningless. They require patients to jump through legal, procedural, and logistical hurdles on a time frame that for most is literally impossible. They are in the law by name only to trick voters into making this ban seem less extreme than it actually is. In Florida, patients are also required to visit a physician twice, at least 24 hours apart, prior to receiving an abortion. And this requirement is still in effect under the 6-week abortion ban. So that is why we call it a near total abortion ban. This is the beautiful amendment that will appear on the ballots in Florida in November. Our job is to earn 60% of the vote in order to enshrine this paragraph into our state constitution, which will explicitly, again, limit government interference with abortion. So it's titled Amendment to Limit Government Interference with Abortion. The ballot summary: no law shall prohibit, penalize, delay, or restrict abortion before viability or when necessary to protect the patient's health as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. This amendment does not change the legislature's constitutional authority to require notification to a parent or guardian before a minor has an abortion. So what does Amendment 4 do? It will stop the extreme abortion ban with no real exceptions. It'll protect doctors from prosecution. It protects patients who seek abortions from prosecution, and it will end the mandatory 2-physician 24-hour waiting period rules. And again, we need 60% of Floridians to vote yes on Amendment 4 this November. So this is an abortion ban with devastating impacts. These are real Florida stories throughout the state. Deborah Dorbert, who her and her husband learned that their pregnancy wasn't viable to a Potter syndrome diagnosis. Without other options, the Dorbert spent more than 3 months waiting for the birth of their dead child. There's stories of there's countless stories of patients having to go out of state to receive care. And then there's Anya's story, which is devastating. Anya was forced to deliver a stillborn fetus alone in a bathroom at a hair salon, and she nearly lost her life from blood loss. And these are all due to complicated, nuanced cases in which doctors need to be treating their patient, in which the legislature has prevented them from doing so. There is nowhere else in the Southeast to absorb Florida's 84,000 patients. All these factors affect women or birthing folks differently in their experiences with abortions and abortion stigma. There's also a multitude of reasons that patients need abortion care, as I just said, and healthcare conditions can be, again, complex and nuanced. That is why this is such an important milestone in ensuring doctors can properly care for their patients facing a wide variety of issues and complications. So let's talk a little bit about Florida voters. According to recent polling, a majority of Florida voters support limiting government interference with abortion. Across party lines, cultures, religions, and social class, a majority of Floridians believe the government should not be involved with a woman's private medical decisions to get an abortion. During petition collection in a span of 8 months, we blew our goal of close to 900,000 petitions collected out of the water. This speaks to the unprecedented support and momentum that there is behind this amendment to get politicians out of private lives and medical health care decisions. Most initiative campaigns take much longer to qualify, which is why we are so confident that voters will approve our amendment once they have the chance to in November. In Florida, in order for a ballot amendment to pass, we must achieve 60% of the vote, which is why we're an all-gas, no-brakes campaign working to speak to voters across the state every day. So let's talk about how we talk to those Florida voters. First of all, the fate of the ballot initiative hinges on getting significant support from Republican and independent voters. We must not make this a partisan fight. We are on much stronger ground when we frame the ballot initiative in terms of stopping government interference with abortion, as opposed to protecting the right to abortion. I know that there are many people that have been in this fight for longer than I've been alive, and I know that pro-choice is messaging that has been used for generations. However, for this specific amendment on the ballot, we are asking people to frame it in terms of stopping government interference. The best way to talk about abortion in Florida is to frame it as a medical decision that patients and doctors should have the freedom to make for themselves without government interference. Do not take the bait on questions meant to put us on the defensive. Wherever possible, pivot back to shared values that Floridians deserve the freedom to make these decisions and are against government bans. So we don't want to talk about blanket legality. That only gets us 61% of the vote. So we talk about values. The amendment is not about making abortion legal in Florida. It's about preventing government interference with abortion. When we frame our message through the values of limiting government interference, we see support jump to 74%. Amendment 4 can't be a partisan fight. Math doesn't add up unless you win Republicans. We must ensure that our campaign remains nonpartisan and call out those who believe ballot initiatives are about Democratic turnout mechanisms. Our goal is to kick out all politicians, regardless of their party affiliation, out of private medical decisions. What to say and why you should say it. So we're going to review some of the top line things we should say about the amendment and why. The government should not interfere in personal medical decisions between Floridians and their doctors. Doctors and nurses should not have to risk criminal prosecution to treat the patient in front of them. So we're opening with a powerful shared value statement, leaning into abortion as a patient-doctor decision. But Florida politicians have just banned abortion before many women even realize that they're pregnant, without any real exceptions for rape or incest. And that's not all. They proposed laws that would ban all abortions and put access to common fertility treatments like IVF at risk. So we're raising the stakes, heighten the threat of the 6-week abortion ban without real exceptions to appeal to a wider swath of the electorate. And these bans have dangerous consequences. Again, we want to stick to Florida stories when we're talking about what those dangerous consequences are, but we want to tell real stories that outline the consequences of these bans, not national stories that are in the media, real Florida stories. And the fact is, we can never know what someone else is going through. We're not in their shoes. That's why we must vote yes to keep the government out of our exam rooms and make sure Florida families and their doctors have the freedom to make the decisions that are right for them. So we're tapping into empathy and, again, leaning into our shared values. And we're connecting a yes vote to freedom from the government. So what not to say? Avoid talking about, there are some things you just want to avoid talking about completely when speaking about Amendment 4. Avoid talking about viability unless pushed on it. Never communicate in terms of weeks, months, or trimesters. If you do get pushed on it, the best response is, I'm not a doctor treating this patient, and so I cannot determine viability. Avoid pregnant person, instead stick to patient, which leans again into the medical frame. Do not attack Republicans, including DeSantis or Trump directly. Instead, refer to extreme politicians who banned abortion. Avoid getting dragged into the weeds about when, how often, and why abortions may happen later in pregnancy. Do not frame the amendment as a restoration of Roe, which is not in itself a compelling reason to most voters. Instead, focus on stopping extreme bans. Unless communicating with our base or other activists, do not mention Florida being a safe haven for abortion in the Southeast, even though we just kind of covered that. For many swing voters, doing so triggers concerns about abortion tourism. How to talk about the extreme abortion ban? So there's 3 key points here. It is an extreme abortion ban, which is better than saying 6 weeks, because a lot of people don't necessarily know what 6 weeks means, and a lot of them will just assume that that means abortion is still legal, without thinking about all the other hurdles that patients have to jump through to get care. And then the second point, before many women even realize that they're pregnant. And the third point, that doesn't have any real exceptions. We can also add that the ban is strongly opposed by majorities of Floridians across party lines. If we are pressed on 3, we should say those so-called exceptions are meaningless. Again, they require patients to jump through legal, procedural, and logistical hurdles on a time frame that for most is literally impossible. And they're in the law, again, by name only, to make this ban seem less extreme than it is. I did want to cover some tricky Q&A. Janice, may I ask how I'm doing on time?
Actually, I believe you're doing just fine. You can proceed. I think you're
Okay.
plenty of
I
time.
think I've got like 6 more slides left, so I just want to make sure. Okay, so some tricky Q&A. Does this amendment allow abortion for any reason until the moment of birth? No, that's nothing but a scare tactic. This amendment clearly allows reasonable limits on abortion. Floridians believe that the government should stay out of private medical decisions between patients and doctors. They understand that near total bans lead to dire consequences and force doctors to risk criminal prosecution just for treating their patients. This amendment puts these decisions back in the hands of patients and their doctors by prohibiting the government from banning abortion before viability or blocking needed care when the patient's health is at risk. What does healthcare provider mean? Does that mean that just anyone could perform an abortion? Of course not. You don't go to your dentist for a heart surgery. You wouldn't go to a massage therapist for an abortion. Healthcare providers are all bound by their scope of practice, standards of care, and ethics. These ridiculous false claims are only meant to scare and confuse voters. Does this amendment undo parental protections in Florida? No, it's actually on the amendment. We agree strongly that parents should have the right to advocate for their child's health, safety, and well-being, and we respect the Florida voters who have already voted to allow parents to do so. That's why the amendment expressly states that it does not change Florida's current constitutional protections. So do not respond. Do not respond when to anything candidates or elected officials say, either about this amendment or about abortion in general. Questions designed to bait us, for example, around the fact that the female justices voted against the amendment while the male justices voted for it. That should be ignored. We should also ignore public polls, because most of the public polls have been asking about the amendment in ways that are highly misleading and not how the amendment is written. When asked about such polls, we should say it's best practice for surveys to ask about ballot initiatives as they would appear on the ballot. So I believe in the last poll, we were at 74%. But I don't pay attention to public polls that often. We are an all gas, no brakes campaign, so I'm just out there talking to voters. So how can you support Yes on 4? Help us reach voters about Amendment 4. Incorporate Yes on 4 in your voter outreach plans, postcards, door knocks, dials, communities, events, texts. Host a fundraiser for Yes on 4. Join our weekly partner update call. You can email me, Kolyn at floridiansprotectingfreedom.com. And then I've got a QR code. Oh, my QR code isn't working, but I can go ahead and drop this link in the chat here. It's just mobilize.us. Yes for Florida. So sign up to attend an action in your area. We've got stuff all over the state happening. And again, if you can't find something in your area or you'd like something a little closer to your area, shoot me an email. I'll drop my email in the chat. Okay. And find and follow us online. Yes, at Yes for Florida is our handle, or you can go to yesforflorida.com. And lastly, we are hiring. I really would like we're looking for a fellow in Brevard County. We're actually, our hiring deadline is tomorrow. So if you are interested in working with the Yes on 4 campaign as a fellow, please visit yesforflorida.com/jobs or email me a cover letter and a resume. I will fit you in for an interview tomorrow. So please, if you're interested in joining our team, email me tonight. And
By
I
the way,
believe that
Kolyn,
is all for me.
Kolyn, I saw that there's I was going to say your QR code popped up there just a second ago. Now it's back up. That's great.
Oh yeah, this is our website. This isn't actually the site to sign up for actions, but this is our website to learn more. I had a QR code on the signing up for action slide, but it didn't show up for some reason.
Well, Kolyn, thank you very, very much.
Thank
You know,
you.
if we were in a live event, people would be standing up and giving you a round of applause, and we want you to feel the love in the room. We really do appreciate that. This is such an important issue. I think that this year, perhaps more than ever before in my life, you can just taste the threat in the air to women's rights. There are so many people doing so many things in so many different places that are trying to take us backwards. And we're a progressive organization. We're trying to improve the quality of everyone's life and looking ahead to the future, trying to make the world a better place. There are people that are literally trying to take us back not just to 1940, but maybe to 1840. And that is completely unacceptable. I think that modern people, it doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man, modern citizens understand the threat. This is serious and it's real, um, and we are with you. This is a very, very important effort. So thank you for all that you're doing. And we're going to be opening the floor for questions and answers to our audience here in just a few minutes after our next speaker. But thank you again. That's Kolyn Brown, Deputy Organizing Director, Floridians for Protecting Freedom. Our next speaker, again, will be Jason Garcia. He's an investigative reporter, podcaster, producer of Seeking Rents. And we've been so happy to have you, Jason, in the past. We're glad that you're here tonight. And I'm just going to be quiet, let you take the floor. Jason Garcia, you have the floor.
Thanks for having me. And Kolyn, thanks for that. That was fascinating and like really helpful. I was texting some friends as you did that I wish I'd gotten this briefing a while ago, because I've made some of those do not do mistakes in how I've talked about this in the past. So I think one of the things I want to start by is just adding a bit more, a few more data points around just sort of the urgency around this. But let me, before I start talking about that, let me stress I would defer entirely to what Kolyn had to say about how to talk about this. Like this is more just to convey to the group more urgency, even more urgency, just about where things might go if you don't pass Amendment 4. So we talked about Florida already has this near total abortion ban. Republicans like to call it 6 weeks, although when you actually do the math, it works out to more like a 2-week abortion ban. It is a near total abortion ban. But the reality is they want to ban abortion completely, and they have not hidden that fact. There's lots of evidence of this. So we start with Erin Grahl. I'm sure most folks here are familiar with her. She's a state senator from the Vero Beach area. She's actually the sponsor of Florida is now on round 2 of abortion bans. You might remember we started with a 15-week abortion ban, and then we went to the 6-week one. She has said to abortion rights, or I'm sorry, to anti-abortion groups that she intends and wants to ban abortion completely. This is actually in minutes of meetings where she's talked to religious groups that serve on state boards. She has not hidden this. She has said just we have to act. We have to act incrementally. That's the only way we get this done. So as horrible as this near total abortion ban is already, it is not where things end if Republicans aren't checked. If this extremism isn't stopped, the interference will only continue to grow. Another data point is, and Kolyn referenced this in her presentation, we actually had a total abortion ban filed in the Florida legislature this year. There was no exceptions whatsoever. It was a complete abortion ban. And that was filed by a guy by the name of David Barrero, a Republican down in Miami. And the bill didn't pass this year. In fact, Republican leadership sort of ran screaming from it just because the politics around it were so bad. But the reality is this is how it starts, right? The 6-week abortion ban was around for years first, right? Dennis Baxley, who is one of the craziest legislators in Florida. I mean, this is the author of the Stand Your Ground law. He is an anti-abortion absolutist. He filed they used to call it the heartbeat bill. He filed that in 2019. So part of this is about moving the Overton window, right? And you're seeing Florida Republicans do that. Florida Republican politicians in Tallahassee, not Republican voters or everyday Republicans, but politicians in Tallahassee are actively trying to move the window so they can get to the point where they can completely ban abortion. The other thing they want to do, and another thing that makes Amendment 4 so important, is this concept of fetal personhood. So like when a guy like David Barrero, the guy who sponsored the total abortion ban this past session, when he gets asked about, why on earth would you make a rape victim carry their rapist baby to terms, he will talk in the analogy he uses is we don't let a rape victim murder a born person, or we don't let mothers murder a child who was born of rape. So why would we let them murder a fetus, right? And what he's articulating there is that fetuses should have, and fetuses, embryos, and even zygotes should have the exact same legal rights as people, right? This is what fetal personhood refers to, and it should go without saying that's a crazy idea, right? You end up in once you adopt that framing, you end up in some very scary places. This is how you end up sort of forcing rape victims to carry their rapist babies to terms. But it is also, and people will be very familiar with this, how you end up banning in vitro fertilization, right? This is when in vitro fertilization clinics had to shut down temporarily in Alabama. This came out of that state had passed a fetal personhood law. And the Supreme Court there interpreted it in such a way that this applied to, you could not destroy embryos in test tubes that are part of the in vitro process, right? And the ruling, as crazy as it sounded, it made total sense. I've actually read the ruling, but if you believe that a fetus is the same thing as a person, then it should make no difference whatsoever if that fetus is in a womb or in a test tube, right? And that's just the logical conclusion of fetal personhood. And so this Alabama ruling is probably the only thing that stopped Florida from passing a fetal personhood law this year. They were actively moving forward with one in the legislature, and then sort of like the total abortion ban, the politics around it got so toxic after that they sort of ran screaming from it. And one of the things you'll probably hear if this comes up with Republicans is they'll talk about how we're going to protect in vitro fertilization, even if we pass a fetal personhood bill. You can't do it. You cannot pass a fetal personhood bill and still protect in vitro fertilization. And there's two reasons. First, the base that is pushing this, the sort of the far right fundamentalists about this issue, get furious when they exempt zygotes and fetuses outside the womb. And these are the people that they respond to. We could sort of layer this conversation into gerrymandering and how all of the electoral incentives for the vast majority of the Florida legislature are about catering to the extreme base because there's not competitive general elections anymore. So those are the people they respond to. But more to the point, once you pass a fetal personhood law, goes into the realm of the courts, right? It will ultimately be up to them to decide how to interpret this, which again is how Alabama got to the point of deciding that an embryo in a test tube is also a person and shutting down in vitro fertilization. And to that point, it's important to remember just what extremists are going on the Florida courts around here. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. Folks here might remember there was a big controversy a couple of years ago where a judge in Tampa refused to allow a minor woman to get an abortion who could not go to her parents the state has mandatory consent for parents. And she could not get that from her parents. Her situation was a dangerous family situation, but a judge would not allow her to get an abortion anyway through this mechanism called a judicial bypass because her grades were too low. Her GPA in school was too low. And he said that was evidence that she was not mature enough to get an abortion, although apparently mature enough to become a parent. And so these are the kind of people on judges. And so that ruling generated like just nationwide scorn, and voters in Hillsborough County, where this guy was, immediately threw him out of office in the next election. And you know what happened after that, though? Ron DeSantis elevated him to an even higher court. That guy is now on the 6th District Court of Appeal in Florida. That's one of the courts in Florida that actually writes laws, this appellate court. It's one of the most important courts in Florida. And so these are the sorts of people that will be interpreting these laws. And so you need Amendment 4 to stop it. To start with, if Amendment 4 passes, they cannot ban abortion. That is completely unconstitutional. If Amendment 4 passes, there are limits on how far they can go with fetal personhood. And the reason for that is even the most extreme judges cannot rule in a way that invalidates a constitutional right. You have to interpret laws, even when you're balancing rights. You have to interpret them in a way that allows harmony from them. So if Amendment 4 is in the Constitution, if the Constitution literally forbids government interference with abortion, that will stop Florida Republicans from using a fetal personhood law as a backdoor way to get there by essentially claiming it's murder. And all of this stuff is happening. The fetal personhood law is absolutely coming back in this next session. This is where they're going next. The other sort of scary thing about the way this is all unfolding is when the Florida Supreme Court allowed Amendment 4 onto the ballot, they also signaled to the legislature that they want a fetal personhood law passed, right? And the way they did that is there was like a flurry of concurring and dissenting opinions. It was a 4-3 vote on the court to allow Amendment 4 onto the ballot. But in these various concurring and dissenting opinions, the 6 of the 7 justices all signaled in their rulings that they thought a fetus was a person and that they would uphold a fetal personhood law as constitutional. That is as clear as you can get of a court telling the legislature, we want you to pass this law and we will uphold it. That's going to happen. And so if Amendment 4 doesn't pass, there is no limit to how far they can go with fetal personhood. If Amendment 4 does pass, it will put a brake on that because, again, even these justices that want this will have to balance those two constitutional rights. As I said, they can't elevate one right to the point that it invalidates another completely. They have to balance them. So I say all that just as, I'm sure everybody here was like fully on board and understanding how important this is. But as sort of dark as things have already gotten on abortion in Florida with this near total abortion ban, it could get far worse and will get far worse unless, we actually do something to limit government interference with abortion in Florida. And the only other point I'll make, and I think it's pretty powerful on the national side, is this directly relates to Project 2025, which I'm sure everybody here is familiar with Project 2025 at this point. It's the sort of conservative blueprint that a bunch of far-right organizations led by the Heritage Foundation have drawn up for Donald Trump to use if he's elected president. And there's a lot of very specifics in Project 2025 about how they will use federal powers to restrict access to abortion, including restricting the ability to send medication through the mail, using an old law that was meant to stop like obscene materials from going through, from being mailed to people, using that as a way to stop medication from being mailed. They will cut off funding. They want to track women who get abortions, where they come from. They want to like gather their biographical details in a database and then use that database to start attacking funding for states that don't stop them. I mean, there's some like dark stuff in here, but the way it ties into all this is, as I mentioned, Project 2024, the chief organizer of of that is a group called the Heritage Foundation. We've actually found public records that show the Heritage Foundation was one of the lead authors and supporters of the near total abortion ban in Florida, right? This is all part of an intentional strategy to do this all over the place. And so, you know, you can make the case as you sort of think through this, that what Project 2025 looks like nationally, is exactly what's already happened in Florida with this near total abortion ban. And so these two issues are like inextricably linked to each other, all of which makes Amendment 4 even more important in that sense, because you're going to need these state constitutional protections if the federal government tries to interfere in other ways. So I'll step back there. I want to leave as much time as possible for questions. And again, thanks to Kolyn for that report. And as I said, anything I said, I would defer to her guidance on how to actually talk to this with real people.
Well, thank you very much, Jason. And again, I'll tell you what, if this were a room full of people, you'd really be feeling the love. This is such an important issue, and it's important for us to take it to heart. You know, a lot of folks are sitting back and kind of thinking, well, maybe this is already, you know, gonna pass, and we're gonna just need to cruise on it. Don't count on it. Every stinking vote counts, right up until the midnight or whatever, until the last poll closes. It probably out in the Panhandle on election night. We really need to be making sure that people vote, people are educated on these topics, people are motivated to do the right thing. Again, we're begging people, please vote by mail. If you aren't signed up to vote by mail, go to the Supervisor Elections website and get that taken care of tonight. You can do it remotely on the Supervisor Elections website. It's www.votebrevard.gov. And if you've never gone over there, take a quick look. You can check out your own voting status. You can make sure that you are registered to vote. If you think that you might already be registered to vote by mail, it's important to remember that our Republicans in the Florida state legislature have taken away everybody that previously was registered to vote by mail. They dumped everybody. We're all of us that were registered to vote by mail, and we're pretty sure that we were going to get our ballot in the mail. They stopped it. So you have to go in, re-register to vote by mail. It's real easy. You can do it very quickly. But please, please, please double check it. Help your neighbors, help your friends, help relatives. Make sure that everybody's registered to vote. Make sure that they execute or exercise their right to vote. People died so that we could have this right to vote. We must not let this opportunity pass. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Kolyn. This is our chance to turn the floor over to our guests, to our members. I would, by the way, remind everybody to please take a quick look at the chat. If you haven't looked at the chat, we've got some references in there for how you can look up previous Space Coast Progressive Alliance events. We've got a reference to the Brevard Unity rally. Kolyn has her links in there. And let's see, we've got something. Oh, we've got a link about where to go to register to vote. Thank you, Nellie Cardinal, for getting that in there. And if you have a question, please look around on the Zoom format, whatever you're using, whether you're on a phone, a pad, or a computer, and look for where it says react. Click on that. There's a little button that says raise your hand. We already have our first two questions, so let's get to them. We ask that you please limit your questions to 2 minutes so that everybody will have a chance to ask their questions, get their questions answered by this wonderful pair of speakers tonight. Jan, you have the floor. And please remember to unmute yourself.
Thank you for that. My question is for Jason, and if Amendment 4 passes, which would be wonderful if it did, and the abortion becomes legal in Florida again, but if Trump wins, does he have the ability through the federal government to come back to Florida, because he keeps saying it's a state issue, but does he have the ability to come in and to change everything for us? Is that something he can do? What do you think?
Yeah, well, let me throw the standard disclaimer that I'm not a lawyer, particularly around federal law.
I
but
know.
yeah, but you know, no should be the answer. That the federal government, the president does not have the power to essentially pass an abortion ban himself or herself without Congress acting. Um, that said, there is, the federal government obviously has an enormous amount of power, and they could step in and find ways to try and interfere uh, in many different ways. And you ultimately defer to the courts about what is federal overreach. But this abortion ban is an issue of state law, so it is difficult for the federal government to overcome state law unless Congress steps in and passes a federal abortion ban. So if you're in a situation where Republicans control both chambers of Congress and the White House, things get really scary at that point. But without that happening, it's hard for me to see a way that they would be able to completely invalidate it.
Oh, this is, of course, a man who's saying that he will become a dictator on day one, right? Kolyn, would you like to weigh in on this issue, on this question? Don't forget to unmute yourself. That's a no, I think is what I see. Okay. Well, Karen Houston, she's got the floor. Come on down.
Yeah, I was going to ask, maybe, I don't know if either of you know anything about any of this, but of the people, like the examples that you showed, Kolyn, of the ladies that had, issues, one almost died. Well, I'm sure there's more that almost died. And with the regulations on abortion, things such as these kind of situations, do you hear of anybody doing a class action suit, or possibly, I would think that would be one kind of situation that people could start to bring more attention to it, and to get their message out there about messing with women's rights to their own bodies. Anybody hear of any class action suits or any suits whatsoever? If I almost lose my life, I'll be considering it. So I was wondering if anybody started anything like that.
I can jump in there, Kolyn, unless you want to. I mean, there has been a challenge to the law itself. Now, the challenge was based on the 15-week abortion ban, the initial. So when they passed the 6-week ban, they set it up so that it could not go into effect until the court had resolved a challenge to the 15-week ban. But I mean, the court has already ruled meaning the Florida Supreme Court, the one that Ron DeSantis has appointed 5 of the 7 justices, and then a 6th one is every bit as extreme as a DeSantis appointee. But this court has already ruled that the Florida legislature has the power to ban abortion. So there's not really, I'm not aware of a way that you could challenge the law. Like a class action suit, you're talking about, you're getting into, you'd probably have to be suing some provider or something that did some harm, like a doctor that denied an abortion in one of these like flimsy exceptions they've included. But I would absolutely defer to, Kolyn and other folks in the repro space about whether or not that would be a helpful thing to do in this context.
At least bring attention, if nothing else, and spread it far and wide what people are going through here, especially Florida.
Well, you're right, Karen. It seems that our Constitution gives us the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And when actions that your legislature takes denies your right to life, when it denies your existence, there's a threat to your existence that you could take action legally. By the way, I saw Vicky, you had your hand up, and then it disappeared. I don't know if that was accidental or if you still have a question, Vicky. Do you or not? Well, let's see, Vicky, her hand went down. So Jan's hand is up. Jan, you got the floor.
I have another question. Okay. How is it that Trump, who is now a felon, how is it that he's allowed to vote? I mean, Florida has, and again, this is probably a question for Jason, but I know that they passed the law saying that the felons could vote after they've done their time. But if Trump has not done his time, and God knows what kind of bills he hasn't paid for his legal things, Why is it that he would be allowed to vote if he's a felon and he has all these issues? You have any idea? Other than he's Trump.
Well, yeah, this is not something I've written about myself, so I'm going off memory off of what I read about this, but there's two things. One, he was convicted in New York, and so I believe Florida follows the other states' laws with how to treat that. The other thing, he hasn't exhausted all his appeals and stuff like that. So I think even if he'd been in Florida, I'm not sure he would have lost his rights just yet. So there's not like, there's many sort of but for Trump situations, but I think this one is more a function of just the bureaucracy of the conviction happening in another state.
Okay.
You're correct.
No, we should have sent the question to you.
No, you were absolutely correct. The key thing is that he was convicted in the state of New York, which does not deny felons the right to vote, and therefore they have their legislative action controls in this case. It's a great question, though, isn't it? And I see Bonnie Ida has her hand up. Bonnie, you have the floor.
This is for Kolyn. The usual argument, of course, for not allowing abortion is a religious one. And I wonder if you can offer an argument for those people. Obviously, they can not have an abortion, but they want to apply it to everybody. What do we do? Because that is the most common argument I hear.
I think leaning again into the medical frame is the best way to combat that argument. I will say we have a whole team that works on constituency, working with faith organizations and I'm sure that they've got better talking points than I do as they're talking to voters. But we have a whole team that is working with faith leaders across the state. But again, I would lean into a medical frame, talking about how abortion is healthcare, and it is, a doctor needs to treat their patients. Leaning into those stories, those real Florida stories of that are tragic about women that needed to go out of state for care, or that had to wait for 3 months for the birth of their dead child, or those kind of real stories really pull at the heartstrings of folks as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And Suzanne Taylor has a question. Suzanne, by the way, is an attorney, and she is the president of the League of Women Voters of the Space Coast. She may actually be able to kind of back us up on that question about Donald Trump's right to vote or not. So Suzanne, if you would please, you have a question, or I don't know if you'd like to back us up on that issue of Donald Trump voting.
Yes, I would. And I'm sorry, I just realized my microphone wasn't in. Can everybody hear me? Okay,
we
great.
can hear you loud and clear. We've got you.
I was going to hesitate. I wasn't going to say that I was a lawyer because I don't practice election law or anything like that. But two quick points. One is he's not a convicted felon yet. He's not a convicted felon until he's actually sentenced. But I absolutely agree with you that once that happens, hopefully that happens and the law takes effect the way it's supposed to, and the rule of law wins, that then, yes, he would be able to vote in Florida for exactly the reason that you both said. And the other thing I just want to point out is about the question, I think Karen asked about suing a lawsuit pending. One of the problems with that is the legislators have immunity. We've heard a lot about immunity, but they have immunity. So who do you sue? You sue the doctor who's afraid that they're going to go to prison. That's kind of the question. It's the people who are really responsible for this are unsuable. Thank you.
That's rather depressing, isn't it? Well, you know what? We have our next question, and that is Daniel McDowell. Daniel, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Phil. My question is, and first of all, thank you for the guest speakers tonight. Did a great job. And someone who's held signs up for the last 6 months for reproductive freedom and continue to do that in Indian River, I will tell you, I definitely get a lot of feedback from a lot of folks out there about this issue. I do want to say that I need clarity here on the 60%. Is that 60% of the registered voters? And I've got a couple other follow-ups to that.
No,
Great question for either of you.
Sorry, that's an easy one. Although Colin might know it better, but it's 60% of the votes cast.
Of the votes cast. So, okay, so if the turnout is a low turnout, it's still 60% of that.
That's right.
Okay, excellent. Do we know if, I know we talked about on nonpartisan lines, or we sense that we might have to really pull from our conservative folks, but for the most part, is that gender specific? Do we know if that's because my sense is it's not.
Let's see. I'm
As
going
far
to
as
ask
the
you to
support.
clarify that one more
The-
time,
the sup-
Daniel. Just what is it
Sure.
that's gender
The
specific?
sup- is the support for signing on that 74% that you're polling at currently, is that gender specific, or is it heavily weighted in one gender versus the other?
Great question.
I don't believe it is gender specific. And if it is, I don't have the information on that. I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. I just
Great question, though.
right. I'm just curious because out there I got thumbs up pretty much from both male and female, and but the third question I have,
Actually, I'll
was-
tell you, Daniel, give me 1 second. Let's ask Jason, do you have any insight as to polling regarding support for Amendment 4?
Yeah, I may be misunderstanding the question, but that the polling you're seeing, that's overall, that's all voters, right? There is likely a gender gap, within it in terms of, I would expect that it's the support is even higher among women than men, but like the when you see like a poll that comes out that says 74%, that's everybody combined. They're not just like releasing the results of a crosstab or anything like that. But I might be misunderstanding the question.
He was
No,
just
no, I
wondering,
think
50,
you're
is
right
it
on it.
50-50? Is it 80-20? Are we seeing that it's women really pushing this issue? I know from things that I've seen, and it's been a little while since I've seen polling data on this, is that it is pretty darn remarkably balanced. I don't know about 50-50, but people think of this as a women's issue, and it's like, no. This is a citizen's issue. This is for all citizens. The right of independence, freedom from government interference is kind of universal. And so that's what I remember seeing the last time I saw polling, and that it might be outdated. Back to you, Daniel, your additional question.
Right, and I just want to follow with the final question, and that is, it's an uncomfortable question, but the reality is assuming that we get the 60+ votes and our legislation comes after us, and as they did in the felon amendment when we approved that. Have we thought anything about that, or how do we respond to folks when they make that statement to us? Thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to ask you just for my own mental state. When you say that our legislature comes after us, do you mean to say that they will no longer respect the will of the people and they'll just ignore the amendment to the Constitution and go about their own business?
They'll write new laws, and I guess I just want to make sure that how do we get in front of that and help people understand that it's not that simple.
I think both Jason and Colin are going to want to weigh in on that one.
I'm happy to jump in just because this is something we spent a bit of time writing about and looking into. They will absolutely try and interfere with it, but one of the beauties of Amendment 4 is how simple and direct it is. So there are limits to how far they can go, but what will likely happen is, sort of regardless of whether Amendment 4 passes, but especially if Amendment 4 passes, they will pass a fetal personhood law. They'll get that, they'll orchestrate a challenge to that'll get to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will say fetuses are persons under the Florida Constitution, and they'll set up a situation where there are competing rights. Like I sort of briefly alluded to this, but that, the right, the prohibition on the limit of government, the right to have limited government interference, no government interference in abortion versus the right of a fetus as a person to live. And so then it will fall to the court to balance those two rights. But this is what makes Amendment 4 so important, is fetal personhood is probably coming regardless. And so you need Amendment 4 to stop just how far they can go with fetal personhood. Because again, once you get a situation where there are competing constitutional rights, the court is supposed to interpret them in as easily as much as possible to harmonize the two. You can't, for instance, rule that well, you can't ever have an abortion because a fetus is a person, because that would completely invalidate the right under the right of limited government interference here. So that is probably where this lands, I would expect. But because of the way Amendment 4 is written, it's pretty ironclad in terms of, as long as we're still dealing with a court that's operating like within the bounds of normal law, it is hard to completely undo it.
I don't know if you were waiting on me to weigh in here. I will say I get that question all the time, and I'm just glad Jason answered it, and I'm glad to hear from Jason on it, because I just tell people that we're focused on passing the amendment and not anything after that.
The other thing to add there too, and this goes to like, the urgency around like there was an illusion earlier that people might get complacent if they think it's going to pass, but like this needs to pass. Not only is it really hard to get 60%, but it needs to pass by as hard a margin as possible, because the other thing you want to do is send a message to the Florida legislature that like voters are pissed about this stuff, right? And so if you want to stop them from trying to screw with this after the fact, then you pass the amendment with 80% of the vote or something like that. And there will be potentially a chilling effect, particularly if these guys respond to, there are a handful of incentives they respond to, but the one more than any is electoral incentives. So nobody should act like it's a fait accompli that they're going to find ways to undo it. They might steer clear of it if they think it's ultimately an electoral loser. So it's just as important to get the margin on this as high as possible.
And it's another
Yeah.
reminder why we should be replacing our state legislators. When we have conservatives who are acting against the obvious will of the voters in this state, people need to wake up. The truth is, it's happening because they're working intentionally against the will of the voters. Through gerrymandering, through their maneuvering, we understand. Let us face it, for not only year after year, but decade after decade, whenever the voters have passed things like, let's say, high-speed rail in the state of Florida, we voted that in years ago, and our legislators said, what do these people know? We're just going to ignore that completely. And this is not just our legislators, but our governor and his cabinet have ignored the will of the people, and that's a challenge. How does a democracy stand when the elected leaders ignore the obvious will of the people in the Constitution of the damn state? You get it. And Bonnie, and oh, by the way, I didn't mean to cut you off. It sounded like, Kolyn, you had something you wanted to add.
And Jason was talking about how we need to reach over 60% of the vote and how important that is. And I just want to add, as we're talking to voters, and Daniel mentioned, you're getting support from everyone on Yes on 4, and I'm sure you've seen this out on the field, but on the doors, I'll talk to people. First of all, they don't know about the abortion ban. So that's the first thing we have to educate them on. And then they don't know about Amendment 4. And then once they do know about these things, it's a very easy conversation from there. That's how these conversations have been going at the door. So really what we need to be doing is educating people as best we can.
And Bonnie, you have the floor. Oh, you are muted. If you could unmute yourself, ma'am.
This is might
There you
seem crazy, but I have always wondered, why do men have standing on this issue anyway? What do they have to do with it?
And there you go. Who would like to take that one? Why do men have standing on this?
For one thing, in the Jewish religion, a fetus does not have personhood until birth. So it's completely one with the mother, with the woman carrying it. So it's nothing to do with anybody else.
I don't have a good answer to that, but it reminds me of a funny story that we just came across recently, where the Republican sponsors of these abortion bans are very cognizant of that exact dynamic, even though it's like this is mostly happening because of male politicians for the most part. We came across some records that showed like Ron DeSantis's press office when they were stage managing the signing of the first abortion ban. There were explicit instructions in there that no men can be in frame. The only two men allowed on stage were the two presiding officers of the legislature, and they had to be at the very far ends of the stage. Everybody else had to be women and children. Like they are constantly trying to think of these optics to try and make it appear as though these aren't just being pushed by male legislators, even though, you know, in the Florida House right now, every single committee chair is a man.
Kolyn, any insight to add?
Just say that, you know, there's a great organization, Men for Choice. I would say men have a lot to do with it. And I would want them to be more involved, more cued in, more afraid of this ban, just as much as, you know, women have to be afraid of this ban. Bring them in, bring the men in, let them, oh, sorry, there's an echo, but let them advocate for us.
And bring them in, but it's the opposition that I'm referring to.
Oh, yeah, duh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Bonnie. I'm looking for any
Thank you for
further
the answer.
questions. We probably have other questions that, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to ask a question while I have the opportunity. And that is that, Jason, I know that the Heritage Foundation has been really rolling out, you know, we're all talking about Project 2025 as being the framework for the next presidential administration, but we know that the Heritage Foundation literally has markup capability, or they literally have been have their hands, their if I might say it, their dirty hands in Florida's state legislature for years. They and have been working with Ron DeSantis, and I know that you have uncovered, and other investigative reporters have uncovered emails, conversations that have gone on between like Leonard Leo, leaders of the Heritage Foundation, other conservatives, people that are funneling money into the president, not to the president, to our would be president, Ron DeSantis, and others, in shaping the legislation that we now have in our state. People from just as the fossil fuel lobbyists have literally, you know, written language that is in the books in states across our country. The Heritage Foundation's been writing the legislation and sending it to the legislators and saying, "Here you go." And can you talk about that?
Yeah, we actually just had a story about this where, you know, we set out to try and figure out just sort of what kind of influence the Heritage Foundation has in Florida. And the premise of this was like kind of like, okay, what does Project 2025 look like in the real world? And it was genuinely shocking, like how much we found. You know, just to use the 2023 legislative session as an example, because if folks remember, that was the session right before Ron DeSantis launched his campaign for president, and so that was the most culturally extreme session that I think, you know, I've been covering the Florida legislature for a little over 20 years now. I've never seen anything like that. I think it's probably safe to say there's never been anything like that, but certainly not in modern memory. And what we found is the Heritage Foundation had a direct role in almost all of the most extreme laws that passed that session. And I mean, this touched every aspect of life in Florida, from like, you know, healthcare and education, but also to finance and real estate, right? So they were directly involved in the abortion ban, but they're also directly involved in a bill like bringing back alien land laws that we now deny Chinese people the ability to buy property in Florida based on nothing more than their race and ethnicity, right? They were directly involved in House Bill 1, which, you folks remember, that was universal private school vouchers, essentially taxpayer-funded stipends for families who choose to send their kids to private academies or religious schools or decide to homeschool them. They were behind legislation to essentially sanction banks that refuse to lend money to fossil fuel producers, gun manufacturers, for-profit prison operators. They were behind the legislation that, I know we've got someone from the League of Women Voters on there this will resonate with, behind adding all these intentional red tapes and these like potentially ruinous fines for groups that try to register people to vote, all designed to stop people from trying to aid their fellow citizens when it comes to navigating the voter registration process. They were behind the sort of notorious immigration law that we passed here, the one that had money for the the migrant kidnapping program, but that is also forcing hospitals to ask patients about their immigration status, and that, you know, literally criminalizes traveling into the state with a family member if that family member is undocumented. You know, literally, no part of life is safe from the Heritage Foundation's prying eye. So the records we found, like, got down all the way down into like regulating which bathrooms transgender people can use, and then also stopping students from using TikTok on college campuses. I mean, that's the sort of depth they want to go to sort of impose their kind of worldview. And they've been doing it in Florida hand in hand. And to be clear, this isn't just lobbying for these laws. Like, we found records where they're literally writing the legislation or editing the legislation as it moves through the process. People here might be familiar with the term in Congress. They'll talk about like marking up a bill. The House and Senate will go into markup. We've got emails where the Heritage Foundation is sending in their markups of bills moving through the Florida legislature, right? They are deeply embedded in Florida government right now.
And where would someone who wants to find out more about Project 2025, what's the best place to go to educate yourself, to get the information, short of actually, I guess there's a book out there that you can buy, but I mean, if you wanted, in other words, if there's a book on the shelves in the bookstore that says Project 2025, is the Heritage Foundation actually publishing this, or is it just available on the web? Where would you go if you were encouraging people to learn more about this threat to our democracy?
Yeah, I mean, it literally is a 900-page book that they printed, and it's available online. You can sort of read it. I think that's part of what's made this so powerful is, you know, it is very easily to fact check the claims that people are making about what's in Project 2025. So you can go to, I mean, I forget the web. I think the website is Project 2025, but you know, just Google it. The first link that'll come up will be the Heritage Foundation home for this document. You can read it yourself. You know, otherwise there are lots of good resources translating it. You know, I'm a big fan of Vox.com, which is, you know, an explanatory journalism news organization, and they've done a lot of good jobs of breaking down what's in Project 2025 and also sort of dispelling some of the more aggressive claims. So, like, for instance, there is not like a total, it does not directly call for a total nationwide abortion ban. What it does do is talk about all the ways you can use federal law to interfere with access to abortion across the states and try and backdoor your way to it. So Vox is a good source for that. You know, I've been listening to a podcast called Strict Scrutiny. They've been doing a series on breaking down all the various aspects of Project 2025. So, you know, there's lots of resources out there to read it. But the document itself, the Heritage Foundation was up until about a month ago very proud of this. So it's out there for anyone to read.
And I see Daniel McDowell has his hand up. Daniel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Phil. Hey, just a quick mention here more on what Kolyn had mentioned earlier and the significance or the importance of messaging. And since, you know, I had mentioned reproductive freedom, and then I know that I was a pro-choice candidate, and I heard her say that the importance was to get yes on 4. And I think that message is going to be powerful going forward if that's what we need to do. And I would emphasize that because the other side is very good at messaging. And what I say to support that comment about messaging is, when you go down to Indian River, you can see no on 4. So they know that your message is being heard. So I definitely think that we have to emphasize, if anything, let's get with one message and get it clear, because I learned that tonight from Kolyn. So thank you for that.
And, you know, Kolyn, it kind of raises an interesting question. That is, I see the yes on 4 signs out there. If somebody wanted to get a yes on 4 yard sign, or they wanted to contribute to the effort, how would they go about doing that?
Just go to the DEC office. They've got them.
Thank you, Larry. Kolyn, do you have an answer for that one?
Yes, we have it's a really long link. I'm sorry, y'all, but that is our store. the link to our store. We actually sell our yard signs at cost on our website where you can order them.
And I know that they're available elsewhere, as Larry was saying. But there is a link in our chat. So those of you that are on the Zoom, if you click on the chat, you can see it's a pretty good sized link, but worth clicking on if you'd like to get more information. More if there's a guess on for shop, not a bad thing. And I just heard from Vicky. Vicky, I don't know if you are interested. You had a question. I don't know if you would want to come back and ask your question or not. She's busy right now, so
Yes, thank you, Phil.
you got it. You got the floor, Vicky.
I apologize for disappearing a few minutes, but I just sold my house and I had to break
Yay!
away to talk to my realtor. And I
Yay!
didn't want to ask the question again, just in case someone else asked it, and I lost my notes. But did anyone ask about or ask a question about the governor's requesting 36,000 petition ballots, signatures to review? And when it's past the deadline, when they've already been vetted, what's that about?
Jason, this might be one for you. I don't know the answer to this. And Colin, maybe you've got it, the answer to that.
I did just learn about this morning, and I'm sure Jason can weigh in better, but I would just say like it's pretty devastating that these voters are going through these very personal investigations, and we're hearing these like stories from regular people that just signed our petition and are now being like investigated. It's pretty upsetting. I know our legal team is working on a response right now, but it's pretty obvious that, when are ballots being printed? I think tomorrow. So it's just pretty obvious that they're doing everything they can to stop us.
Yeah,
that is a horrible situation. I'm sorry. Back to you, Jason.
Oh yeah, that's all right. I was just gonna. I think that's right. I don't think anybody quite knows what the game is here. It seems pretty likely to me what they're trying to set up a lawsuit later on that they'll use to try and challenge the passage. General, it seems hard to believe that they could pull it off the ballot now, but you also don't put anything past them. And what I think it speaks to is it shows just how extreme Tallahassee politicians are going to try and stop this from happening. And you think of the examples we're seeing now. So folks today may have seen that the state, the Agency for Healthcare Administration, which is supposed to be a place where you go for, neutral and legitimate health information, just unveiled a propaganda campaign ad against Amendment 4, all funded with taxpayer dollars, right? It's completely inappropriate. Never seen anything like that. There's no way that should go. We should also, folks here might remember the controversy recently where they've stuck essentially what amounts to an anti-abortion ad onto Amendment 4, where they have a financial impact statement where they're warning that they could lead to costs, and they broke all sort of norms of economic forecasting to get it there, to the point where like the state's main economist, there's this panel that analyzes the economic impact of constitutional amendments, and the main economists on there refused to go along with the message they printed on there. But the way they got it on there is Ron DeSantis and Paul Renner, the Speaker of the State House, essentially rigged that committee. They pulled their regular representatives off of this panel and put in. So Ron DeSantis appointed a political appointee that is essentially a former legislative aide that has been a hack for Republicans forever and now runs the Office of Management and Budget for the state of Florida. He stuck him on this panel. Paul Renner was even worse. He brought someone right in from the Heritage Foundation, right? Someone he gave a $70 an hour taxpayer-funded job to a part-time job to this analyst, who, by the way, still works for the Heritage Foundation. Put her on the Florida House payroll so he could stick her onto this panel, and they could inscribe this misleading financial statement onto the ballot. But I think you look at all this, we should all take power from that. It shows you how terrified they are of the support that this amendment is drawing, the way it is mobilizing folks, the way it really will put a collar on how far they can go. I was just saying to someone else earlier, I think one of the things this belies is they really do intend to ban all abortion. They're not going to stop at this near total abortion ban, and they are worked up because this amendment would stop that from happening. So I mean, it's outrageous, but also we should take some encouragement from the fact that they are so clearly panicked by this.
Our democracy really is under threat. For anyone that doubts that, just think about what you just heard. Our democracy is under threat. It is time for all of us to be activated, to be mobilized on this issue or whatever issue that gets you out to the poll. We need to be talking to our neighbors. We need to be talking to our friends. Sometimes it's very uncomfortable to talk about politics with our family members, but I'll tell you what, this is disenfranchisement at its very base. And they are very powerful and they're very good at it. And our opponents are I even hate to refer to them as conservatives. They're very neocons are very, very effective at what they do. They've been working on this for a long time. Do we have any other questions? Do we have any other hands up? I don't see any at the moment. And that may be bringing us to the end of our
I was
program.
trying to ask a question. I gave up.
Oh, Larry, so Larry Abdullah, I don't see your hand up, but it sounds like we've got you. So,
Okay.
Larry, you
what
have
I'm
the
wondering
floor.
is, do the people who go out for Amendment 4 when they reach households, I'm quite sick, but when they reach households over that topic, do they also discuss other candidates or other topics, or do they just stick to that topic? I guess I'm asking Suzanne Taylor, whoever's doing it.
Kolyn, you've been canvassing very heavily on this, and so do you cover a range of topics? And I know there are other organizations that are out canvassing on this as well, making calls. Do you stay with Yes on 4, or you or any of the other organizations that are supporting you? Did they broaden it out? They focus on one issue, or do they broaden it out?
Yeah, we're very focused on the one issue.
Okay.
And
Can I add there too?
Sure, Jason.
And Kolyn touched on this in her presentation, but it is like super important to remember not to partisanize. I don't even know if that's a word, but partisanize Amendment 4, right? I mean, we were just talking about it. You need 60% to begin with. You cannot get there with only Democratic voters. You can't get there. And also we want to get the margin as high as possible, right? We want this to send like a chilling message to the people that to Tallahassee to stop screwing around with this stuff. And so I know that's like something that's been drilled into me by a lot of my friends that are really engaged in this issue, that we can't, you cannot fall into the trap of making this a Democratic issue. I get hives every time I see a story written somewhere that talks about how Amendment 4 might be good for Democratic turnout, right? You just want to be very intentional, like Kolyn said earlier, about treating this as a nonpartisan issue about healthcare, about medicine, about limiting government interference for everyone.
Limiting government interference, of course, for all of my lifetime has been a big item for conservatives, for folks that I generally disagree with. But you know what? There are times when government has what's the phrase? No damn right, or keep mind your own damn business, I think is a phrase that's becoming pretty popular these days. And here it is, guys. This is it's right on our plate. Standing up for a person's right to make their own decisions in a doctor's office is pretty darn foundational. And as some of our Supreme Court justices, when they were being questioned before the Senate, were asked, where are men's issues being attacked, or men's rights being attacked? Is there anybody raising legislation to limit a man's right to have a vasectomy? And why should that Why, the reality is focusing on the fact that this is a civil right to have privacy, to have a right to autonomy over your own body. Your own medical decisions are yours, regardless of whether you're a man, woman, or whether what you identify as. You're a human being. You're a citizen of the United States, and you have certain basic rights, which are presented to all citizens, all humans, and so that's the only way to look at this, and the only way to present it, I guess. Surely we must have one or more questions left. If not, we're going to begin to close this. I do not see any further questions. I do want to take a moment to ask Jason and Kolyn, what action items would you like to see our guests, our members take as a result of our presentation tonight? What sorts of things can we do to make a difference? And either one of you, who would like to go first? Kolyn, let's pick you. Kolyn, you're first on the list. Go right ahead. An action
So
item.
polite, both of us. I am looking for volunteer leaders in Brevard County, folks that can help organize other volunteers to knock doors together. Fall is coming, the weather's cooling down. We really need to be knocking on doors and having face-to-face conversations with volunteers, or crowd canvassing, showing up to different events and crowd canvassing, canvassing the crowd. Those are the two ways, the most impactful ways that we can talk to voters face to face at the moment. So I'm looking for volunteer leaders that are, already doing this work or just really passionate about it and want to jump in. I will provide you with materials and swag and training and ongoing support, all of that. But I'm just looking for some folks that are willing to, round up some other volunteers and get to canvassing together, in Brevard County specifically. If you're not interested in being a volunteer leader with us, again, you can visit mobilize.us/yes and the number 4 Florida. And that link is in the chat here, to find a local action in your area. I know Leanne and Suzanne have been hosting some amazing postcarding events in the area that have been getting, a lot of people turning up to them. So that stuff is happening in Brevard County.
And speaking to the canvassing issue, it's important for people to remember that even if you aren't interested yourself necessarily in going and knocking on a door, which actually gets to be kind of fun if you go into it with the right attitude, it can be kind of neat, interesting, get to know your neighbors and talk to them. You can be a driver. If you just want to go drive the car while the other person does the canvassing, that actually makes people that are doing the door knocking more powerful. It's a force multiplier, as they might say in the military. You can make canvassers more effective if you're willing to drive a car, or make phone calls, or work at a table, or help put up signs, or all sorts of things like that you never really think about. There's an office perhaps somewhere, many of the supporting organizations that are supporting Yes on 4. You could go work in an office and just answer the phones. And that may seem like it's a small thing, but it's very, very, very important right now. Again, we the Space Coast Progressive Alliance has in the 20 years that we've existed, encourage people to get involved in our democracy, to think globally but act locally. Work and help a local candidate, help on a local issue. We're basically encouraging folks to support Yes on 4 and Yes on 3, and no on the rest. And I think Larry, do you have a question? No, he doesn't. Anyway, the essence is that it's critically important for people to get involved. This is the time they desperately need money. This is the time when they desperately need boots on the ground, so to speak. Jason, I don't know if you have some ideas on action items for people to take?
Well, part of the reason I wanted to go second was my main action item is just do whatever Colin says for Amendment 4. She's the expert, and every, you know, it is such a critical thing. Like I can't stress enough how important helping in whatever way you can. I can amplify, you know, the importance of on the ground volunteers are all over the state, and this is true of any campaign. But you know, for all the focus on money, and that's obviously important in elections. You know, having people willing to knock on doors, make phone calls, text messages, all that sort of legwork is so important to campaigns. And it's the sort of thing that any of us can do, right? There's nothing holding us back from either knocking on doors or making a few phone calls or sending text messages, or like you said, those force multipliers, like driving people. There are absolutely ways for everybody to get involved at a level that they are comfortable with. Maybe the only other thing I'll throw out there is, and part of this is in my mind. We posted a story today at Seeking Rents about looking at the legislative map this year, where there are roughly 15 competitive races around the state for state house. You know, it's a function of gerrymandering, right? Like basically 90% of the seats are out of reach in a general election. But maybe, you know, we need to change the legislature ultimately. You know, there's only so many times we can keep going the constitutional amendment route, especially as they're going to keep ratcheting up the barriers to amending the Constitution. So, you know, you guys are in Brevard County, and unfortunately, you know, there's not really any races over there this year that are, you know, are likely to have much of an impact to Tallahassee. But maybe, you know, get involved, reach out to candidates or organizing committees in the places where there are these competitive legislative races. See what you can do. You know, maybe make a weekend trip to Orlando to knock on a few doors for candidates you support that are in these races where really are going to come down to, in many cases, it'll be a few hundred votes, right? So anything you can do to help that effort and to try and really sort of smartly focus your work on ways that likely lead to impact, because this ultimately becomes like a bottom up thing, right? Like it's going to have to be one district at a time, from local races at a time. You know, we're not going to sort of reorient Florida overnight. So just think about ways you can get involved in places that might not be in your back door, but that if you are willing to reach out to those places would have an enormous impact on the state as a whole.
It is something most people don't realize that they can do, but you can phone bank in any one of the swing states and ask them to support a candidate or an issue that you believe in. And that can be very helpful. You know, one of the things that Labor Day does for all of us is you get a chance to think about the impact of organized labor. One of the things that organized labor representatives are really good at is getting their members out, sometimes in adjacent states, sometimes, you know, to try to support issues that are important to them. It's really interesting to watch how effective they can be. Our opponents are just as good, and they're good, you know, sending their people out, and they're just, I mean, we've watched how the Heritage Foundation can mess with legislation in states that are far across the country from wherever they are. Their people can be quite effective, and we have to learn and understand that you don't just have to be worrying about your own neighborhood, your own people. Think globally, act locally. Good words to live by, but boy, you know, you can reach out. One of the things that all canvassers will tell you, by the way, is that the prevalence of no trespassing signs, gated communities, it seems to be more every year. More and more and more communities are gated, and so you may not be able to knock on the door there, but you may be able to call, or you may be able to send them an email or a text. And you know, we're all getting bombarded with all of this stuff now. Sometimes, if it's from a neighbor, they might answer the phone, or the text or the email, and you can have a personal impact, where a robot that's sending out these things is very impersonal. So being involved is so important. Anything else, the guys that I'm blathering on here, but anything else that I've missed or that you would like to add to it, Jason, Colin? Any other action items? Just take action. The important thing for everybody is just do something, right? It's a wonderful little thing to have burning in the back of your head. You know, another day has passed. Did I do something today to impact the election? every day. They wake up in the morning and think, what can I do today to impact the election? And how can you make more of an impact in a positive way? We are so lucky to have both of you here. I'd like to remind everyone that next first Thursday's Zoom program for the Space Coast Progressive Alliance will be called Educated We Stand. This is one that you don't want to miss. We've been talking about education this year and the importance in this election of having the right people in the right places. Our school board is very important, and we want you to come. And please, that is going to be Thursday, October 3rd, at 6:30 p.m. If you can join us, you will be very impressed, I think, with the program we've got scheduled. Educated We Stand. Please check our website, www.scpaflorida.com. And for everyone else, please come off of mute. Let's give a round of applause, a standing ovation for Kolyn Brown, Jason Garcia, our friends. This is very
Yay.
important. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming to the Space Coast.
It is absolutely wonderful to have you. We know that your time is valuable. We know that you've been working a lot of different groups, going around, getting the word out, educating people, and we are so glad that you're here. We thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again on another one of our events. Thank you so much. And round of applause once again, guys.
Yay.
Have
Good night,
a wonderful
everybody.
night, everybody. Please.
And congratulations, Vicky, on
Thank
selling.
you.
Yeah,
Thank
good
you.
news.
I'm so excited.
So happy for you.
Vicky, we are going to miss you. Jason, Kolyn, you were looking at a past president, another past president of the Space Coast Progressive Alliance, but Vicky Impoko has been such an important voice in our community in so many ways, and especially for women's rights. Vicky, you are a rock star on this topic. Frankly, we would have been very lucky to have you